resources are a huge excuse today because there are some people who have much and there are some people who have little. And sometimes people that have little, the reason why they stay on the bottom is because they just keep pointing to that as the reason why they can't succeed. And it's just not true.
You're not just going to wake up one day and say, I want to be better. And because you want to be better, you are better. You have to have a plan. You have to have a process, and you got to be dedicated to it, right? That's difficult. It's not easy to get better.
People who are not as prepared, teams that are not as prepared, coaches that are not as prepared, they tend to focus on all that other stuff whenever things start going bad. They focus on things that are out of their control. And I think what it comes down to is you're basically admitting you're not as prepared as this other team. Welcome back to the Coaching Life Podcast. This one is episode 16, and today we are going to have something for everyone. It doesn't matter if you're a coach, a parent, a player. If you're a human being, there is something in this episode that we are confident you're going to be able to take away and apply to your life. And I know that it was good for both Pat and myself as both of us took notes during this entire episode, just because there were so many times in this conversation where we just nodded our heads and said, yes, amen, that is true. And we hope that it challenges and encourages you just as much as it did us. It's episode 16, and it starts right now.
Welcome back to the Coaching Life. I'm Pat Martin, here with Chris Stewart. Coach, how you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well.
Me too.
Doing pretty well.
Not bad.
Yeah.
Coach,
I should sound more enthusiastic than that. That didn't sound very enthusiastic.
You don't think so?
No. Let me smile when I say it. I'm doing great.
Good job,
Looking forward
Coach.
to today.
You're trying to pick me up.
Yeah.
Coach, I just got one thing to say to start the podcast, and that is 13-3. We'll go from there. But no, I wanted you to look at my my notes for today's episode. I got you. I have nothing.
You've done no preparation other than create an outline.
Right. Well, that's not true. I've got
that's
notes
preparation.
down here. If we look down, I've got a lot of notes, underneath here.
So for those of you that are listening and you don't know what he's talking about, what I'm looking at right now is a sheet that says episode number 16, opening word. Pat's going to give the opening word. So we actually do plan. We don't just come in here and have conversations. We actually do plan what we want to talk about and chat about it a little bit, and then create an outline to keep us on topic, supposedly to keep us within a certain time limit, but we've just obliterated that. So
sure,
but hopefully it keeps it interesting. That's the goal, is to keep the topics moving, keep the train of thought moving, keep it interesting, and since we don't have a guest on those days we don't have a guest, it's good to follow an outline. So. Sure.
And in this particular podcast or this episode that we're doing, I struggled a little bit to come up with an opening that I liked. So I added some stuff in there, and I deleted it, and I changed it, and now it's blank, as you can see. So I think, when I thought about this podcast and I was covering the material, reviewing the material, our mission with the podcast is that anybody listening out there can take something from an episode that will help them be a better person. And we're not shy about sharing other resources out there. We talk about, other podcasts, other books. We talk about people that, have mentored us, and, we talk about anybody out there that has anything to do with improving coaches, improving athletes, and improving ourselves as people. We're not shy about sharing that. And I think one of the things I struggle with, because I know that we didn't really want to use the podcast as an avenue to sell books, and we're kind of we think about that a lot. And we try to shy away from it, but in all honesty, I feel like there's a little bit of integrity inside of me that I have to say that a lot of the things that we talk about on the podcast and a lot of the concepts we talk about, you've been talking about for a long time. And you wrote 2 books about a lot of the concepts that we talk about. The first book was Building Champions, and the second book just happened to be named The Coaching Life. And I want, if it's our mission as hosts of the coaching podcast to reach as many people as we can and provide them with the best content as we can, I would be remiss to not mention The Coaching Life as a book that everyone out there should go out and try to find and try to read, because it's the content is so good, and it helps us in so many ways. And as I was reviewing the content that we're going to talk about today, there was a couple times throughout this last week that I used some of the ideas and concepts that you talked about in The Coaching Life in my own life, not in baseball, not in sports, but as a person. So we're going to talk today about 2 chapters in The Coaching Life. And the first chapter talks a little bit about what we need to do to be successful. And I wanted to start the podcast off today, this episode, with talking about what does it take for us to be the best that we can be as athletes, as coaches, as people. I want to get your thoughts on that.
Thank you. I guess first I want to say I appreciate that, brother. I appreciate that word. That's it's always humbling to talk about your own creation, and so I'm thankful that you're here to do that, because I probably wouldn't. And so,
in the first episode we did, I said I was here to validate you. Right?
Yeah, I do remember that. So on to the topic then. What does it take to be the best we can be? I think it's multifaceted, but it's multifaceted and complex, yet I think it's actually really simple.
Yeah.
I think people really do know. I think people know what it takes to be the best version of themselves that they can possibly be. And I'll start with this. I'll give 3 words, and maybe we can, because I tried to think of how could we simplify this in such a way that we're not spending an hour talking about one thing, and it's going to be tough. But I'll say these 3 words: discipline, consistency, and then you pack those 2 things into something called a routine, which is a system for the way you should live your life. And I really think that when it comes down to it, the things that you and I talk about in here on this podcast related to coaching, related to athletes, because we basically put challenges out there for coaches to be better at what they do,
right?
For athletes to get to be better at what they do, and how they can do that, strength training and recruiting advice, things like that. We bring in coaches to talk about, give them tips on what the best way for them is to have some exposure to college coaches and to take their game to the next level. We talk to parents about being better at being a parent and being, a better parent of a student athlete, and how you can do that and better support your child, but also have a better attitude and a better outlook and perspective whenever you go to these games or whenever you are involved in these things. And so I think what's happening is, even though today we may not spend much time in our conversation getting specific in terms of athletics and sports and youth sports, talking about what it takes to be the best you can be, whether you're one of those, if you're one of those 3 people that I mentioned, or more than one, perhaps a parent, coach, a child that's going to become all 3 eventually, it comes down to you need it's a disciplined life. And if you are going to be better tomorrow than you are today, if you wake up today and you say, I want to be better today than I was yesterday, you're not just going to be better. You're not just going to wake up and all of a sudden and decide. You can't just decide you're going to be better. Something else has to happen.
Right.
And that thing is discipline. You've got to create discipline in your life. No one just becomes something because they want to. That's just called well-wishing. I mean, you just want, there's a funny story that I heard one time, and I included it in one of my books, and that is, even when we go, like you and I go to trainings for Ohio University, different kinds of trainings where we're trying to get people want us to get better at our jobs. You just went to one last week, right?
That's actually I use some of the stuff that I'm talking about here for that training. So I might mention that later.
Those trainings are often called what? I mean, you've got training. There are certain words for them, and one word that's in my mind right now that sometimes is given to a training. You go to a conference and you go to the main session, and then there's some smaller breakout sessions that are often called like workshops, right?
Yeah,
they're called workshops, and it's interesting that you never hear of want shops.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Everybody in life wants to be better.
Yeah.
We want to, I hope, I mean, if you don't, then,
Why?
yeah.
that's a
I
good
mean,
question.
find someone to talk to because you need some help. I mean, if hopefully
That's something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Hopefully we want to get better. We want to be a better person, better at our jobs, better at parenting, better at whatever sport we're playing. Hopefully we want to get better. But here's the thing. It takes more than wanting.
Yeah.
You can't just want something and then it happens. You don't go into a training, and they don't call those training want shops, meaning you go and you sit and you talk about things that you want, and then you go back home and you hope that they happen to you. That's not why. I think the reason they call it a workshop is because you go and they give you some really good tips and principles and advice that they expect you to take back to your place of work and implement and do the work.
Yeah.
Do the work. You've got to do the work. That's the only way to get better.
I would agree with that. In my notes here, I've got a lot of, I would say, intangible concepts like, well, maybe not intangible, attitude, being healthy and focusing on what you can control. But all of those things come back to this process that you're kind of talking about here of being disciplined and having that routine.
Yeah.
That you can count on, regardless of what you're doing, regardless of what you're facing, you can count on those things to pull you through. And you're right. You're not just going to wake up one day and say, I want to be better. And because you want to be better, you are better. You have to have a plan. You have to have a process, and you got to be dedicated to it. Right. And Coach, that's difficult.
Yeah.
It's not easy. It's not easy to get better.
Here's an example. I mean, when I say earlier that I think everyone truly knows what it takes, the difference is doing it. I mean, I think mentally we know what it takes to get better. I think one just really obvious example is being healthier, right?
Yes, right.
Like being a healthier person, whether you want to lose weight or gain weight, gain muscle, whatever it is, but just being healthier, right?
Yeah.
If you're overweight and you want to lose, or if you're weak and you want to get strong. Okay, so if you were to ask someone who wants that, they have that desire. If you were to ask them, tell me what you think it would take for you to lose weight, or tell me what you think it would take for you to get stronger. I'll bet 99% of the people who have that desire can answer that question accurately.
Yeah. I would say that the answer would be typically eat better and exercise.
Exactly.
Right.
And even if you break it down further than that, you say, what do you mean by eat better? I bet they could still be accurate with it.
Sure they could.
They know things that they should cut out.
Yes.
They know things that they should add into their diet, right?
Yeah.
And they even though they may not be able to define for themselves an exact exercise regimen, an exact plan, they know that they sit too much.
Yeah.
That they need to get out and walk. That they need to begin somewhere. Everyone who has a brain knows what it takes to get better. We really do. If we say we don't, we're bullcrapping ourselves. We're blowing smoke. We know what it takes. The difference is, so what we got to figure out is, why aren't we getting better? Well, the difference is we're just not doing it. We're not doing the work. How do you get from that point of knowing to actually doing? Maybe that's what we're going to try to solve here today.
Maybe. But I would say most people say they have a lot of reasons why they're not able, to focus on things like this, or not able to do that work, so, as you're saying.
So one person calls them reasons.
Right.
Another person calls them
excuses. Yeah, exactly. So, obviously these are going to come up in a lot of different ways depending on what you're talking about. But, when you think about excuses, and I think everyone would probably relate to this. I know I have. I've been working out. I've never worked out in my life other than in this past year. It's just,
why did you start?
I started because I went to the doctor. My cholesterol was high.
So that's one reason. Yeah, right.
I mean, I need to get healthier.
You're scared a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I was, so I knew I needed to change something. So I was committed to it, but there were still days.
And why did you choose exercise?
Well, I just assumed that would make me more healthy.
Yeah,
and that's not the only thing.
Because
I changed my diet too.
Yeah, exercise and diet.
Yeah.
Was it a hard thing to figure out?
It was crazy hard.
But not.
Oh, you mean what I had to do?
To mentally decide, what do I need to do to be healthier? How hard was it to figure it out?
It wasn't.
Did you need a doctor to tell you?
I didn't need. Yeah, right. Exactly.
Right. Everyone knows, I think.
Yeah. Well, and so you're making it simple there, which is what we need to do.
Yeah.
But I think that's that's an excuse that we make, because the first thing that I did, I can't even. Oh, the Mediterranean diet.
Okay.
I started on the Mediterranean diet, and I was gung ho about it. I'm the type of person that if I put my mind to it, I'm going all in. You know what I mean? I'm not going halfway. I'm going all in.
Yeah.
And I was hitting this Mediterranean diet hard. And I remember it's real funny. I texted my doctor one day on like a Wednesday, and I said, "Hey," it was about 7:00. Yeah, I had already eaten dinner. I said, "Hey, I've got about 250 calories in today."
Oh my gosh.
That's what she said too. She said, "You're gonna die if you don't start eating." So, and I thought,
what were you just eating celery all day?
No, I'm telling you, you eat a bunch of nuts and you eat fish. Fish
Fish and nuts,
don't have a lot of calories in it, and it's got a lot of protein. But it's hard to build up those calories if you can really stick to it. And immediately I thought, man, this is so hard. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to eat. And
because so it starts getting a little more complex, but
that's an excuse
to take that first step.
That was my point, because what we do, I went at it too hard, right? And then I'm like, man, I don't know what to do. I'd be better off just not even worried about it. But and my doctor helped me too, and some other people helped me as well. Just eliminating a couple things from your diet makes a huge difference. And I think when we talk about becoming the best that we can be, making it simple and just changing one thing. We talk about being 1% better. Mm-hmm. Let's be 1% better today than we were yesterday.
Yeah, which is all borrowed, like you said at the beginning.
Right.
I mean, I can't tell you who the first person was that said something about becoming 1% better, but there's a friend of mine, guy on Twitter friend, I guess you can say. Got a lot of Twitter acquaintances.
We all have Twitter friends.
Yeah, Joe Ferraro has an entire podcast called 1% Better, the 1% Better podcast, and it's phenomenal. Very, very good. He, every week he comes out with a podcast on Monday or Tuesday, and an episode that is just basically he either has a guest or he'll talk himself about his own experiences of just things to do to just become 1% better, just get a little bit better every day.
It's a really simple concept, because if you think about it, you can become 1% better in anything, any aspect of life. You don't have to focus on one thing, but if you are becoming better at anything, you're becoming a better person. If you're becoming a better person, you're becoming better at what you're trying to
multiplies.
accomplish.
It multiplies in your life.
Leaks over,
Getting
definitely.
1% better in one area of life is naturally going to make you, by nature of the fact that you're improving yourself in one area, you're improving yourself in other areas as well. Sometimes just because it's happening without you realizing it, but sometimes because once you start down that road, you like it.
Yeah.
And you want to, okay, I got better over here. I can get better over here. And so what does that mean for the athlete, for the coach, for the, we answered a question and I think the last episode that we did about, if you want to be a better coach, become a better person. Listen to resources and read books and do things to be a better person, and you are going to become a better coach the more you better yourself as a person, and that's just simply what we're talking about here.
Yes.
Is how it relates to. I mean, this is still related to our normal podcast, which is typically talking about amateur sports and people who coach it, parents, people who play it, and people who play it.
Right, because we want to know how to make ourselves better as athletes. We want to know how to make ourselves better as coaches. We want to know how to make our athletes better, right? And when we're talking about improving every day, and regardless of what it is, that improvement is equated to a process or a discipline, as you said before. Yeah. And we're gaining that discipline, we're understanding that discipline, and that process, that routine that we're developing, like we said, we can use for anything.
Yeah.
Right. And that gets us through the excuses. Heck, we're human beings. We're not going to feel well on days.
Right. A lot of times you're not going to feel well.
Yeah.
But that's what discipline is, though.
Right.
I mean, I see discipline as first of all, I think we could spend a lot of time getting a better definition of discipline, reclaiming that word, I think, because discipline sometimes gets a bad rap because people tend to equate it with spanking your kids,
right.
or punishment. We equate it with, you go into a grocery store and you see a kid just throwing a fit, and you thought that kid needs some discipline, and you think about it in that terms. And so what we tend to think about when it comes to discipline is that it's something external that is done for us or to us, that somebody has to discipline me. And that's a misnomer. Discipline is from within. It starts with you. It is an internal thing that you decide for yourself. That's really the truest. I mean, you take the word discipline all the way back to, all the way back even to Christ and those days, and back in the Greek language, the people that Christ chose to follow him, that he taught. I mean, and not just Christ, any rabbi or teacher in that day. What were they called? Disciples.
Oh, true.
Yeah. So that word, we get our word discipline from those, from all the way back there. And you know how a disciple actually was quote unquote chosen? Typically, they weren't chosen by the teacher. Typically, you decided who you wanted to follow. Like education in that day was often based on you seeing a rabbi that you would like to learn under, and you going to that rabbi and saying, "Hey, I would like to follow you." And that rabbi saying, "Sure, okay, I'd like to be your disciple." And you're choosing for yourself an ongoing process of learning, because that person it's essentially a mentorship relationship. And so that person is a disciple.
Yeah.
We later, as language shifts to Latin, we get the word disciplina or discipulus or whatever. I don't know Latin, but again, the meaning is the same. It literally means ongoing learning that you choose for yourself, or something like that. I paraphrased it, but that's what discipline is. And so, if you really take what it means to have discipline, it starts with you. And so, when we bring it to today, then in 2019, and you sitting in your car right now listening, or you, I don't know, maybe eating some chips while you're listening to this. Here's what it means: doing what needs to be done, even if you don't feel like it. So a 2019 definition of discipline is myself, doing what I know needs to be done, even though I don't feel like it. Brian Cain says, act differently than you feel. Act differently than you feel. That if you want to understand what it means to be a disciplined person, tomorrow morning when your alarm goes off and you feel like hitting the snooze, just try it. Just try it. Just tell yourself, I'm going to act differently than I feel right now. And I'm going to see what happens. And get up. And I'll tell you what's going to happen. You're going to hate it. It's going to hurt. You're not going to like it at first. Yeah. And that's the thing, is you just do it anyway. Why? Because you know that it's going to be better for you to do that. You'll get more done. You're going to have more time. You're not going to be rushing around in the morning. You might even have time to go out for a little jog. Who knows, right? There are lots of things that you could be doing. Maybe if you get up earlier than you anticipated, you could go sit down in your favorite chair, open up a journal, and write down 3 things you're thankful for. Begin your day like that and see how different it feels. I guarantee you, there's nothing bad that could come of that. There's nothing bad that can come of it, other than you just maybe inconveniencing yourself for a second because it didn't feel real great to drag yourself out of bed when you didn't want to.
One of the things that I've noticed internally with me is, since we've been doing this podcast and reading The Coaching Life, but I also read Relentless by Tim Grover, who you mentioned.
I referred to Tim Grover, in fact, in one of the chapters of The Coaching Life, and quoted him, and then of course gave him credit in the bibliography. But
yeah, and Tim Grover's a guy that I think he even makes note of it in the book that he's not necessarily going to give you step-by-step instructions on how to be better, but he gets in your face and just tells you, just be better, Yeah.
But
there's been times when I've been sitting at home watching TV, and I feel guilty because I know I'm not using that time to get a practice plan together or to plan out my day the next day so that I have time to do what I know is important. You know what I mean? And I think, preparation, that's part of that discipline that you're talking about, so that we can go out. We know we have a lot more time in a day than what we think.
Time.
Yeah,
It's a big
I know
one,
you
isn't it?
talk about this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Time is actually
When you
an
talk about
excuse,
the
right?
barriers and the excuses,
Yeah.
that's definitely one of them. What is, you asked a question, what are some of the excuses? I mean,
Yeah.
you asked a question in the outline that we have for today. What are some of the excuses that prevent us from being the best we can be? Time is certainly one of them.
Time's one of
The
them.
excuse of not having enough of it.
Right, exactly. Not having the resources,
Yeah.
But again, that really comes back to how, emotion and feeling is really how we're responding to a situation. And so those things it's about how we respond to those things. You know what I mean? To say we don't have the resources, we don't have the time, we don't feel good. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. And
Successful people don't have the time or feel good either all the time.
yeah,
They really, I mean,
that's how
you think you're different than people who are successful?
good point. And they know that. They
Yeah.
know that if they have time, that's a bad thing. Right?
Yeah.
That's how they plan their day.
Yeah.
That's how they make sure that they, if they have time,
Yeah.
I'm not making money. I'm not getting better.
Here's the thing about time. Everyone says, I don't have enough, right?
Yeah.
Honestly, the most successful person in the world has 24 hours in a day. The least successful person in the world, the person that's the laziest person in the world who does nothing, has 24 hours in a day. Everybody has the same amount of time. We use terms like, I need to make time to do this, right? I need to make time to exercise. Well, you just need to, when am I ever going to do this? Well, you got to make time. You got to make it. You got to carve it or whatever.
Yeah.
No one's making time.
Yeah.
You can't create time. We all have the same amount of it. The difference, what you got to look at differently is, how do you use it? How am I using time?
Yeah.
Because that's what it comes down to. People who are more successful than you, people who do better at coaching than you do, people who do better at playing the game that you like to play, people who parent better than you, they are using time more wisely than
Exactly.
you. That's the difference. I mean, let's just get right in everybody's face right now.
It's raw.
And when I'm doing this, I'm getting in my own face, because there are times too when I make the same excuses.
Oh,
and I'm reminded
definitely.
of my own words of, no, you're just using time poorly, Chris.
Yeah. Well, I just said that, I mean,
Yeah.
heck, I was watching the Browns last night and I felt really bad about it for a couple of reasons. But,
Did you really want to go there? I wasn't ever going to mention it. This would have been probably 4 weeks ago from the time people heard this, back when they just got shellacked on Monday night by San Francisco. But that's forgotten now. By the time people hear this,
by the
it's
time
forgotten.
this airs, what are we, 4 weeks out?
I believe. Oh, in terms of
This
scheduling
right
our
now.
podcast, yeah, I think we're 4 weeks ahead.
So the Browns will be 6-3 and leading the division by the time this airs. So I'm okay. I'm good.
It seems
But
like you adjust that prediction on every podcast we record.
13-3, pal.
Okay.
You got to be. You know what you got to be to be a Browns fan. You got to be tough.
Optimistic.
You got to be.
Yeah,
You got to be
have tough.
disciplined,
Yeah.
consistent. But
The fans certainly have to be, because the players certainly don't look disciplined.
not yesterday. They didn't. But anyway, in the book, the chapter that we're talking about here, the chapter is called "Do the Work."
Yeah.
And it really is that simple. It's a choice. You have to make it. Just do the work. Don't make excuses. You know what it takes to be successful. It's not that difficult. All right. And even if you're not, people might scoff at that concept. And, there's people out there, there's expert hitting instructors, and there's basketball trainers, and, all these people, coaches that have coached volleyball for, 40 years that obviously know more than other people. But just like we said earlier, you have an idea of what you can do
Yeah.
to be better.
Yeah.
There's always something little
Right.
that you can do to be better.
And what you're saying is another excuse.
Yeah.
Resources.
That's resource. Yeah,
people
right.
people often complain, and especially in areas that are maybe a little poorer than other areas. We live in southeastern Ohio, and the schools around here don't have the same resources as schools in central Ohio. Let's just be honest, we don't. You look on Twitter, you see people in schools up in central Ohio. They're in their indoor hitting facilities. They got these beautiful turf fields that they're fielding. And what happens down here? We all go, woe is me. We don't have those facilities. So you know what I say? All right. So you don't have the resources. So you don't have the facilities. Big deal. So you figured that out. Good deal. Okay, what are you going to do with what you got?
Exactly.
What are you going to find a way to get it done? Figure out a way to do the work that's required to make you better than you were yesterday. That's all it takes. There is a way for you to get it done. And don't tell me that you need resources to get it done. Go on YouTube and just do a little search for some of the best players in the major leagues, where they came from. And you'll see kids in the Dominican Republic and kids in some of the poorer areas of Puerto Rico. And you tell me what kind of resources they've got, what kind of resources they're practicing on.
Yeah.
And who are your best middle infielders in the Major League Baseball right now? Kids that came from those places that really were not utilizing hit tracks and Rapsodo and all this stuff. They're just out there with their bare hands and they're fielding hundreds of ground balls in 15 minutes.
And with no one to help them.
Exactly. Thrown up against the wall. Yeah. They figured out a way to become better. They didn't need all of it. I'm not saying that stuff's not important, and I'm not saying that there's not a place for it. But I'm just saying is resources are a huge excuse today because there are some people who have much, and there are some people who have little. And sometimes people that have little the reason why they stay on the bottom is because they just keep pointing to that as the reason why they can't succeed, and it's just not true. It's just not true. I don't care if you don't have a field to practice on. Is there no land anywhere that you can find that you can spread your kids out and make them a little bit better? Spread them out on. I mean, I understand it. I understand there are challenges.
To take infield.
Yeah, I understand there are challenges, but don't use it as an excuse.
And that's what sports are about.
Yeah,
challenges. That's what life's about. How are we going to respond to the challenges? That's the biggest thing. And it can. I love this as when I went back and read the chapter again, because it is just that simple. You make the choice and you do the work.
Yeah.
Do whatever you need to do.
Yeah.
To get it done.
Yeah. We really don't need a lot of time to talk about this. We just say, all right, just do it.
Yeah.
Somebody had a slogan like that several years ago back in the 80s, didn't they? Just do it. Nike, I think, said that.
Yeah, they did.
Why are we advertising Nike?
Maybe they'll
pick
us up.
There we go. Hey,
I'll reach out to somebody.
Phil Knight, send him an email.
You need to read this, or you need to listen to this episode.
That's right. I think he'd agree.
What do you think it's worth? $1 million?
Oh, don't lowball us.
So
let me give you one more excuse.
Okay.
Because I feel this a lot too. I'm just too tired.
Yeah.
Just too exhausted, and that could be for anything. I'm not just talking about exercise. I mean, I'm mentally tired. I'm mentally
like I
drained.
pulled that out of my pocket
I'm
a time
exhausted.
or two.
Yeah, and that's fine. I understand that. Just don't turn. If you're exhausted, if you're tired, that's great. Just don't turn it into an excuse to be weak.
Yeah.
I mean, really, you.
How are you going to respond to that situation?
You have the choice, even when you're exhausted, to still be a nice person. Don't be a jerk. A lot of times when people are exhausted, what happens? They just become a jerk.
That's definitely me.
Yeah. Oh, well, I didn't mean to say yeah. I don't know.
Oh, yeah, you're agreeing. I know. No. It's cool.
No, I didn't know what you were going to say.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you.
That was an example of somebody just...
People would definitely sympathize with me if they could read some of the abuse that I take through our text messages, but we don't have to get into it. No, I'm just kidding. You know what's funny about people being tired is because I've paid attention as I've kind of started working out and getting, and trying to figure out, when don't have the time. That's definitely an excuse I've used. I watch some of these, celebrities or maybe more so celebrities, maybe big time executives and things like that. They work out like 2 or 3 in the morning.
Yeah.
They find time.
That's when they have the time to do it.
Yeah. I'm just like, I'm thinking, because I was on a spree there for a while that I was working out at 5 a.m. and the sleep caught up with me. But that's part of being disciplined, is making sure that in those situations you're getting the necessary amount of sleep to do what you need to do. Yeah.
I mean, everybody gets tired. Everybody gets exhausted. It feels exhausted sometimes, but it's still, you still faced with the choice when you're tired. Are you going to use it as an excuse for laziness?
Yeah.
Exhaustion does not have to equal laziness. Mm-hmm. It doesn't. It doesn't have to equal being unproductive. You can find a way. In fact, I don't know about you, but when I'm exhausted, sometimes the best thing I need to do is do something productive. Get out there and exercise. Go find something, maybe sit down and write a thank you letter to somebody that I hadn't talked to in years. There are things like that energize you that you don't tend to think about. When we're exhausted, what do we tend to think about? I just need to veg. What does that even mean? I need to veg out. I need to Netflix for a little bit,
Maybe
watch.
lay in your sorrows.
Yeah. What is it? I mean, why? Why do you need to do that? Nobody needs to do that.
Yeah.
There are ways for you to re-energize yourself, even when you feel exhausted, that do not equal being unproductive. Stay productive. Find a way to serve someone, and you'll see that your energy comes right back.
That's a great point. I really like that. That's good stuff. Yeah. You know what I think it takes, though? I think some of these things, people are kind of scoffing that, that you guys make that sound real easy. Like it's just, it's an easy choice. I think it takes a little bit of mental strength.
Oh, it takes a lot of mental strength.
Yeah.
It takes, that's not a strength that you're just going to have because you
mean
decide
if I just want to be mentally strong, I won't be mentally strong?
Because sometimes I think people don't realize that. I've heard coaches talking about how their kids aren't very mentally tough. And the first question that I ask them now, I didn't used to because I didn't know how to approach that. It's like, they need to get tougher, don't they? They need to get more mentally stronger. But now I know how to approach that. And I'll ask them, what are you doing to help them become mentally tougher?
Right.
What exactly, what system do you have in place to help a player that you obviously see is not very mentally tough to get mentally tougher?
Yeah, exactly.
Put that back on us because if we're coaching them, if they're not very physically strong, what do? Just hope that they get physically strong? Or do you start getting them in the weight room?
Exactly. We've talked about strength training. And I think one of the X factors of the discussion we're having right now is the ability to control our minds.
Yeah.
Or to have, a strong mind. And I think mental strength is big in terms of handling challenges and specifically the challenge of being the best that we can be.
Yeah.
It's the same as anything else.
Yeah.
Just like we prepare our bodies, though, our physical strength and our skill. We do things to get stronger physically. We do things to gain skill. We need to prepare our minds to do the same thing, and we need to do this as athletes and as coaches and as people.
Yeah, we have to have a way. We have to have a way that I love. Brian Kite calls them systems. We have to have. I think he says something like, "Lazy people or good people have a plan." But elite people, great people have systems for how they go about their life. And I love that way of thinking because a plan is almost like a goal, like, hey, I've got a goal that's set out there in the future somewhere. Here's our plan. And once we accomplish this plan, you almost need to develop another one to keep going. Right. And it's somewhere along the way, as long as you're keeping developing plans, that's great. But somewhere along the way, when we accomplish our goal, whatever that goal is, we just kind of stop there. And I think that's what happens to a lot of people. And so when you think of your life in terms of a system, a way of living, it's a consistent thing that doesn't really have an end to it. It's just, this is who I am. This is the way I live. And so I think in the same way that we develop practice plans that are in essence systems because we do them every day, and we have a system for getting our kids. For example, what's your system for helping them to be better pitchers? Well, we have them throw bullpens. We have them work on mixing up their pitches in the bullpen. We have, we give them some throwing programs and ways for them to work on their command.
They run 6 miles every day.
They don't do that. We have them run sprints.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. But there's a system, right? So then it comes back then, well, okay, the coach that says, my kids aren't very mentally tough. What's your system for helping them get mentally tougher? Because mental strength is every person, I think, and this applies not just to coaching and playing sports. I think every person in the world should develop a system that is going to help you to deal with the impulsive emotions that can so easily distract us from whatever it is that we're wanting to get better at. Just if it's just life in general, getting to the next level at something, whatever it is that you're trying to do it's distracting you and stopping you, that means that you're mentally not able to get there. You got to be able to get there mentally first. And so I need a system then that's going to help me to deal with all those distractions and take control of them. Take control, because that's what being mentally strong means, taking control of your mind.
Right.
And, and not, being mentally strong means not giving in to your impulses. When you have something happens to you, usually it's because of something that's happening to you that's outside of your control. You show up, we stay in the sports analogy. You show up to a game and the field's a piece of crap, or it starts raining one day, or heck, sometimes I've heard people make excuses and get all mentally bent out of shape when they show up. And here's a big one for kids. It's funny when kids, they're not hitting well and the pitcher doesn't throw very hard. They start, I need him to throw harder. I hit fast. Well, we had a kid that was throwing harder the other day. You didn't hit him well either. But you hear that a lot. It's like an ego thing. He doesn't throw very hard. I can't hit him, right?
Yeah. Well,
figure out a way. So the first thing you're doing is you're focusing on that kid instead of yourself.
That's a good point.
And so just to stay in that kind of analogy, that's the kind of stuff we're talking. That's not a very mentally strong kid. That's not a very mentally strong person. If they're complaining that they can't hit someone because he doesn't throw hard enough, well, what's he trying to? You want him to throw BP out? You want him to? He's trying to get you out, and he obviously has found some way to get you out. And so you're going to continue to get out because you keep focusing on what he's doing instead of what you need to do.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mentioned this earlier. I took training. I was in a training this past week, and I didn't have a very good week. My Monday and Tuesday wasn't a great week. I had some things that I was dealing with personally that weren't fun to deal with, and when Wednesday came, which was the day that we were scheduled to take our exam, I took a sample exam and I failed it, and it kicked in just real quick. I'm like, I started to panic.
Yeah.
And you know what I was doing? I was making excuses. I was saying, well, this thing isn't going right in my life. The course didn't prepare me well enough for the exam, and I actually felt myself kind of on tilt, and I felt I was out of control. And the only thing that I could do is think I need to take control of this. I need to do something that I know that I can do. So I went and I studied and just studied as hard as I could. And left everything that I was blaming or using an excuse. I just left it out of my mind and said the only way I'm going to get to the next step is to do this thing. Yeah, and I think that's a
do
plan.
The work.
Yeah, do the work. Exactly. That's a plan. That's a system. Systems have concepts to them that you fall back on. Yeah, that you're able to use in certain situations. So yeah, that's, and this is going to happen to everyone. Just because you're faced with a mental challenge or say an excuse, an external excuse or external reason, depending on what your perspective is. Again, that's going to happen. We should expect those things, but in knowing that we expect those things, we should have a plan to react to them, a plan to respond to them, which Absolutely. Would be a system. I've done this, and I believe you talked about it too. I would challenge coaches to do this out there too, or really anyone, to just ask people, because it's a fun little exercise. Ask people that's been around a sport for a while how much of that sport is mental related. Yeah. Right. And baseball specifically, because we're baseball and softball people here, but I've done it, and I don't know that I've ever gotten an answer below 50%.
Oh no,
people are always like 50%. Yeah. Never. But usually it's much higher. Usually it's 75, 80, 85, 90%.
Some kids will go up as high as 95, when they answer the question.
Yeah. Right. And I'm sure as everyone's listening out there, think, how would you answer the question? I'm asking you now, what percent of baseball, what percent of softball is mental? Ask yourself that question.
I think if we're honest, I would say at least 50%. Would you say that?
I definitely agree with that. Yeah,
I mean, it's at least 50%, as Yogi Berra says.
Well,
100% of the game is half mental.
Yeah, he said. Well, yeah, right. But what I thought his quote was it's 90%.
90%, yeah.
And the other half is physical, something like that. But yeah, so say the lowest is 50%.
That's a good baseline to draw from, I think.
It's a good baseline. Coaches, how much time in practice do you set aside to condition your players' mental strength?
Yeah.
Players, how much practice time, individual work, study time, whatever time we're using here to become better athletes, how much time are you setting aside to increase your mental strength? Is it 50%? It probably isn't.
Yeah.
Why isn't it?
Take your practice plans and take your any given week. If you're a player, take all the things that you're going to do to try to get better at the game that you play, or try to help people get better at the game that they're playing, depending on your perspective as a coach or as a player. And then break all of that down, all of that practice and preparation down into two categories: physical, mental. And how much of it is. Now, granted, there'll be some mental integrated into the physical, and that's really how it should be done in your practice plan, I think. There should be some specific drills focused just solely on mental strength. I mean, one example of that I think I've given before about having stations during BP where kids can work on their routine.
Plates,
where they can work on a routine of taking deep breaths and how am I going to respond. And basically, you're becoming intentional at that point that bad things are going to happen. Adversity is going to come in whatever game you're playing. And this is good for coaches. It's good for parents. It's good for officials. It's good to have specific plans in place to get yourself prepared for those out of control times of the game. Because that's where mental strength comes into play, is when things that are out of your control start to occur. And then you allow your mind to fixate on those things, and you lose focus.
Yeah.
When you lose focus on what it is that you should be doing right now in either the heat of the moment in competition or regardless of what it is, basically staying on task at your job. I mean, it could be one of them. It's usually because your mind is being distracted by something that's out of your control. And so you've got to take control of that. You got to find ways to gain back control of your mind in those moments and stay focused.
Yeah. Would you say that when you're in that, when you're controlling that moment, you're in the zone?
That's what, being in the zone is what that's called.
Yeah. And so we hear people say that a lot, he's in the zone.
Yeah, what does that mean? Yeah. Some people seem like they're in the zone all the time. It's like he's locked in, right? That guy's locked in.
Right.
He's in the zone. He's, and we hear that, and you see it in other people. You see it in certain players, and you can point it out. What you're saying about that player, and at least in that moment, or maybe just they're that way all the time, is they're a little mentally tougher. They're able to rise above whatever those things that are going on that are out of his control and stay focused. And some people seem like they're always in the zone.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
And some people always out.
Yeah. Yeah. Some people who are really physically good, I mean, they're cage rats, right? They're in practice. They're awesome. You ever have kids like that where you're like, man, this person's a practice player, but they just kind of, in the game, they just keep letting us down. You know? And you have some kids who are like, this kid's a gamer, man. They step up in the game.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes that happens. It's that mental strength is a difference.
And I think it's if you break that down, we're simply talking about what we talked about earlier, of making a choice and doing the work. We know those types of things that might bring us out of the zone are just excuses.
Yeah, they really are.
Because we know, when it comes down to it in a sporting competition, we're really always competing against ourselves, right? We know what we've done to prepare. We know what we can do, what we can accomplish. And if we're not approaching the situation knowing those things and knowing how we can use them to help us succeed, instead worrying about, this pitcher that's throwing, slow, or a pitcher that's throwing real hard, or, hit bad luck, or, officiating, or the weather, or anything like that, we allow ourselves to take a little bit away from that preparation.
Yeah. People who are not as prepared, teams that are not as prepared, coaches that are not as prepared, they tend to focus on all that other stuff whenever things start going bad. You know, the weather. Oh, here we go. We don't ever play well in the rain. You know.
Yeah.
I mean, they focus on things that are out of their control, and I think what it comes down to is you're basically admitting you're not as prepared as this other team. That they're playing in the same weather, they're playing on the same field, they've got the same kind of bad calls. You're just not as prepared.
Yeah.
It comes back to that. Really mental strength is very much attached to your physical preparation as well.
Because and I always get that because for a long time I said I've never seen an umpire or an official lose a game for a team. And people would argue with me about that because, they'll say, well, they've made calls that
game-changing
calls. And, we know that there's a bunch of plays in the course of a game that can change the course of the game.
Mm-hmm.
But there's in any situation that you give me, with those excuses, bad weather, slow start, not feeling good, there's always examples of people that are able to overcome those external reasons and succeed. Yeah. So what's the difference? What's the difference in those situations? Did they get lucky? No, I don't think so. I think they make the choice to overcome those reasons, overcome those excuses. They're not going to allow those things to prevent them from striving to be who they are and what they've prepared to be, right? And that's being in the zone.
Have you ever played a team like that? I mean, I'll tell you now, it's an intimidating thing. The most intimidating team to play, I think, are the teams that they don't hoot and holler a lot. There's not a lot of this, superficial emotion that they come into the game with. But it's the teams that kind of show up calm and cool and collected, and it's almost like they don't even acknowledge you at all.
Yeah,
they don't even acknowledge that they're here to play against an opponent. They just kind of, they're cordial. They're not jerks, but they go out, they get warmed up, they do their business. Not much fanfare at all. They just go out, they just go about everything to do with the game, and it's almost like they're not even acknowledging you.
Yeah,
they're competing, but they're not necessarily. It's almost like what's going on, and they're just focused on the next task, and then the next task, and then the next, and before you know it, that team's beating the tar out of you.
Right.
And it's like, what just happened here? This team was focused.
Well, they already know that their competition started a long time before they ever showed up at the field. Yeah. Their competition started in the training room and on the practice field.
That's your mental focus is going to come back to the fact that you're prepared to accomplish this task.
Right.
I told a story in the Coaching Life, that chapter where we talked about teams that are in the zone and getting knowing how to do the work. And it was back in my high school days. I ran some cross country. From the time I stopped playing football, had the cross country coach approach me and said, "Hey, notice you're not playing football. You need to run cross country." And I'm like, I never thought about this before, but yeah, if it's going to help me stay in shape for basketball and baseball, I'll do it. Ran my first race and hated every second of it, but then ran for another 3 years. It was a different kind of pain. I remember telling my football buddies, "Listen, I'll take getting hit any day, but when you start running and that pain starts to hit you deep in your gut and you have to mentally tell yourself, just keep going. It's like just allowing someone to just stab you and you're just pushing it in even deeper. And you got 3 more miles to go. It's a different kind of pain. I hated it. And I'm not saying that cross country runners are tougher than football players. I'm just saying it's different. You don't make fun of them because it's painful.
Yeah.
And they need quite a bit of mental strength to keep going.
Well, I'll be honest, I never wanted any part of running.
Oh, I hated every second of it. But I loved it as soon as it was done. I mean, I every time I would toe the starting line, I would stand there and my teammates would be beside me and other opponents, and I'd just be underneath my breath going, I hate this. Why in the heck do I do this? I hate it. And then people would look at me strange, and then inevitably there would be somebody else down there like, I get you, brother. I hate it too. It's not fun for a lot of people to just run, but but then when you're out there and then you cross that finish line, there's no greater feeling in the world.
I can relate.
No matter what place you come in. I mean, it's just, I'm done. This is great. And so the bus rides home were awesome. On the way there, I didn't say a word because I'm just thinking about it the whole time. Because one, I'm a competitor and I wanted to win, and I knew I wasn't going to win, but I was going to do my best. And if it meant I puked, but I was going to do my best to win. So anyway, my very first race ever, I never competed in a race before. I've only practiced running. And so all I knew was if I'm going to win, I need to beat all these people. Well, the gun goes off, and I'll never forget. This guy takes off, and he takes off just like a jackrabbit. He's just running hard. Like the first 100 meters or so, he's just going, because it's like an open field, and then it kind of narrows down, and you got this path, and then eventually you're kind of out in the woods and wandering around this course. But the first 100 yards or so is just wide open. And this dude beside me is sprinting out the gate. And I had never started like that. In practice, old Coach O would say, hey, run over here. And we'd start running. And we would start running at our normal pace. But when that gun went off, he's sprinting. I'm like, all right. So I sprinted right along beside the guy. And I'm thinking, okay, this is the pace we're going to have to go. Oh, no, you don't go that pace for 3 miles. And so it wasn't long. I'm slowing I'm worn out. Yeah. I'm slowing way down, and the guy beside me, he made the mistake too. I mean, so we got people now passing us and waving at us, making fun of us. Yeah, you guys thought you were going to, because it's an endurance race. It's not a sprint. And so I remember later, Coach Oliphant. Love Coach Oliphant. He's still at the high school. Yeah, I saw him last week when I went to speak at Meigs High School. One of 2 teachers that were there when I was back in school in the late 80s, early 90s. But I'll never forget, Coach Oliphant pulled me aside, and he said in his particular way of saying things, Mr. Stewart, just a word of advice. He always talk to you like you're an adult, When that starting gun sounds and that guy next to you jumps off the line at 100 miles per hour, let him go. He said, I know it's hard, but let him go. And he went on to explain to me about how, I needed to set my own pace and push yourself, a little bit harder today than you did yesterday, but make sure it's your pace. Keep your pace steady and strong and unrelenting for 3.1 miles. And he said, when you do that, you'll pass that fellow within the second mile of the race that starts out 100 miles an hour. And he was right. And after that day, I never again ran a race against opponents.
Oh yeah, good point. Right.
After that day, I continued to run, and they were there were opponents there, but for me, in my own mind, I had a plan, I had a way, I had a system. I knew how I was going to go about my business in that race, and regardless of what anyone else did, I did what I knew I was there to do. Yep. And I went about my business in my way. And it was one of my first lessons that I learned about just getting in the zone and staying there, and it had to do with, thankful to Coach Oliphant, it had to do with, don't worry about what everybody else is doing.
Yeah.
Just do what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah. And that I'd say we do that a lot, because we look out there and we see, athletes that are at certain points of their maturation process, their development process, and we recognize how further ahead of us that they are. Yeah, we do that as coaches, and
we want to speed it up for ourselves, and we end up hurting ourselves.
We begin responding to them instead of controlling, ourselves and knowing what we can control. So that's good stuff there. That definitely relates.
Yeah, and what's cool about that story, I didn't even think about that until just now. That was a lesson that a coach gave me in high school.
Right.
And it translated immediately to the athletic field. And it's been a life lesson that I've carried with me. I'm 47 years old right now.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I try to do is every Monday write a little thank you card to people. I keep a list of people that I've just said, hey, thanks. You were an influence in my life, and just wanted to express my appreciation for you, and just send it, it's just a little note. And Coach O got one from me a while back, and it was probably right around the time when I wrote this chapter, because I actually put that story in the book.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, it's a cool thing. You coaches out there, when you're just giving little, you never know when you might give a piece of advice that is going to change. That's basically going to stick with and influence a person for the rest of their life.
Sure.
In the way they go about living their life.
Yeah, because we've talked about it before. As coaches, we're not just coaching athletes.
Yeah.
We're coaching people.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of coachable moments that we come across. Yeah. I think this is one of the neat things about the Coaching Life book, is that at the end of each chapter of the book, you have these little notes, these little questions and thought-provoking comments that, kind of challenge the reader on, what their thoughts are about the previous chapter. And it is kind of challenging. Honestly, it it makes it a little bit more of a difficult read. You just can't zip through it. But I think you appreciate it as you're going through it. But one of the things that I love that you say in there, as in one of the coachable moment sections, is you ask if any of the things that you talked about made the reader feel defensive. Yeah. It down
I
there.
wrote that exact thing on my sheet. Yeah.
And we'll talk about that a little bit from your perspective, because obviously it's true for me as I read these books and as I listen to podcasts and as we talk here today. I think about my life and how I go about my life and coaching my kids and coaching other kids, and there are things that I'm like, and even coaching myself that I know I need to do better.
Mm-hmm. Most of the time when we get defensive, it's because something hit us in a way that we know needs to change in our own lives. Sometimes we get defensive because we feel like we're right and we want to combat somebody about something. But I'd say that a lot of times when we're defensive, it's because we know that, okay, it just hit me where it hurts a little bit.
Conviction, right?
It's conviction, yeah. And really, no positive change. I mean, no person in anyone's life, no positive change ever occurs in any person's life without some level of discomfort, without some level of struggle, without some level of sacrifice. There are things that, the reason why people get defensive sometimes is because they're like, well, I can't do this unless I sacrifice that. Something else in my life and sometimes it's something I really like or I want to hold on to. But if I'm going to get better, then I've got to sacrifice that because I want to do this instead. I want to get to the next level. And that's tough. That's what makes us defensive. It will never come. Getting better will never come as long as we continue making excuses for why we can't change. Positive change will never come to your life as long as we keep making excuses for why we can't get better, why we can't do it. I mean, it just isn't going to happen.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah.
I really like that part of it. I'd say, as maybe a suggestion or a recommendation to people out there listening, first of all, if there was anything that we've talked about today that you kind of hit you like, that didn't feel good, I don't agree with that, or, I don't like it or whatever, pay attention to those. Evaluate that, because like Coach says here, that's probably something that you identify in your life that maybe you're not in total control of. I won't say you have to get better, but maybe you're not in total control of.
Maybe given up control.
Or maybe you've given up control, right? So pay attention to those things. If there's anything we say that, kind of strikes you. But the other thing, as I say, is I do think time is a big excuse that we use. And one of the things that I've kind of thought about doing, and I think I made the commitment to do as we were talking here, is writing out my schedule and finding, half an hour segments. Plan your day. Look at your day. Look at tomorrow in a half an hour segment, the whole day.
Yeah.
And see where you have stuff planned, where you're not going to be able to do anything, and see all the open spots. And think about what you can do in those open spots to make yourself better, right? And like we talked about before, it's not that difficult, right? Sitting on the couch eating donuts probably isn't something that's going to be beneficial.
We always go back to that as an example. It's an easy example to use.
Yeah, right? It's probably not going to be something that helps you improve, but you can slide something in those open spots, and it can be anything. Yeah. It could be, reading the Bible. People say, I don't have time to read the Bible. I guarantee you do. And you don't have to read a book of the Bible. You can read, a chapter of the Bible, or you could read a verse in the Bible.
Just a chunk.
Yeah, just a chunk. But set aside, find that time in your schedule. And the only way you can do that is to look at your schedule, evaluate it, write it out. So, and
sometimes you might have to sacrifice something else for something better.
Right. Well, you evaluate the risk and the reward, so to speak.
Right. Because when you think about sacrifice, usually what you're sacrificing out of your life is you're sacrificing something in your life to replace it with something that's actually better. It's just the hard choice is the hard step is actually just doing it.
Right.
It's just, okay, I'm just going to do it. This is what I'm getting rid of, and this is what I'm going to replace it with.
Yeah.
And after a while, once you've lived a few days and you've created that new system with something that is better, You don't even think about that old thing that you sacrificed again.
Exactly. You know, I've said for a long time, what in the world did I do with my time when I didn't have kids?
Sure. Yeah.
If I had that thought before.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And you know, my observation is, my thought is, I laid around on the couch a lot.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
You know, I think I'm much more productive now that I have kids than when I didn't.
Yeah.
I do more things.
You've learned how to structure your time. Around the things that I'm back at that. You know, I have no kids in my house currently. They both went off to college.
Right.
And so there's temptation to veg, right?
Yeah.
To go home and veg.
Yeah.
And what I found is I don't have more time because I have the same amount of time as everybody else.
Right.
But I've had time in my day open up where it used to be filled. For example, at the end of work, I would hardly ever make it home by 9 o'clock at night until 8:30 or 9 at least, sometimes later. Why? Because I'm either going out and helping, I'm either working out with a team that I'm helping coach, which I still am doing that, or one of our kids had something going on every night of the week, it seemed like. A game, something that we would go to, that would cause us to travel and watch the game. And once you don't have that anymore, you look at your life and you go, okay, what am I going to do at this time? And it can quickly get filled with stuff that's meaningless.
Yeah.
If you're not careful. And that's I'm there right now. Probably some people who are listening are there or have been there.
Yeah. Well, I'd say it's easy for, student athletes to be there. If you're especially high school students, I would, if anyone's listening out there, I'd challenge you to think about what you do during the course of your day and how much time you're spending on certain things that really isn't bringing much value to, your goals and who you want to be as a person.
Yeah. And people should understand too that you and we're not no fun people. It's not like I love my life. I have a great time. I mean, it's not like there's no leisure. It's just that you're even, when you choose things that are productive, there's a joy that comes out of that. I think that,
I think
it's still fun though.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I know what you're
when
saying.
You love your work, when you love what you're doing, and you just love hard work, there's something leisurely about it.
I think you've gotten to the point personally where, you've probably gotten to the point where, it's just like anything else. You get better at doing things. You're going to get better as you go along. You're going to get better at dedicating more time to, to more beneficial things and less things that might be perceived as a waste of time.
Can I tell you something? I changed my routine. I told you before about how I always got up in the early morning and worked out.
Right.
And my workout was mainly 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then Tuesday, Thursday, I would try to slip in some cardio or whatever. I actually changed that routine, and now I'm going like right after work because I don't have to go to a ball game or anything. So I'm going down right after work, and I have found myself really looking forward to it, like every day. Just looking for, it's weird because I love my job too. So it's not like I'm looking forward to leaving my job. There's something about that. As I'm walking down Jeff Hill, going to my car, there's something energizing about, I'm getting ready to go and beat my body right now in the weight room.
That's a whole different conversation. Trust me.
It is, but I didn't always feel that way. But I think the point is that you're saying you take those steps and you keep going consistently, little baby steps every day, and eventually a transition happens where now it's not just something you're making yourself do. You're not just acting differently than you feel. Now you feel like doing it.
Yeah.
Now it's who you are. It defines your life. It's part of you. And the key, I think, to beginning the consistency is to start from the beginning, seeing that as who you are. I am a person who lifts weights. I am a person who eats well, or whatever it is that you're trying to do. Change your identity, and then it makes it easier to create that habitual practice.
Yeah,
that consistency.
Yeah, I think it helps you be deliberate about things.
Yeah.
So
If you want to quit smoking, instead of thinking about it in terms of I want to quit smoking, that's a goal. Think of it in terms of your identity. I am a non-smoker. And when you think of yourself as someone who is this, then it feels a little different when it's time to take a cigarette out of the pack,
Sure.
Because that's not who I am.
Right. It kind of changes your way of thinking.
I've decided that's not who I am.
Yep.
It does. If you want, I understand habits are tough. Habits
yeah,
are big.
definitely.
It's a whole nother
Right.
episode. We can talk about habits.
Sure. Well, right.
Maybe we should.
Or two. Did you use all your notes?
Well, no, not quite. A couple stories here I see, but let's save those.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, hey, let us know. You know what you think of the episode. Reach out to us. Give us your thoughts, your opinions. Tell us how you're going to start being 1% better every day.
Yeah.
And let us know what you thought. If you liked the episode, we'd be very happy to hear from you.
Definitely.
But
always happy to hear from listeners.
Right.
Always.
Yeah, we appreciate it. Thanks for joining us.